stopped it. Where's the puck? It came loose on the other side. It's over.
So let me paint you a picture. So I had a pretty shit day at work yesterday.
Me too.
And I figured,
Makes
you know
feeling better.
what? I'm going to get some food. I'm going to make myself a drink. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch the Hawks play.
Where'd you go eat?
I think I just made food at home.
What'd you have?
It's not important. Let me tell my
wanna
story.
This builds the ambiance of the story.
I was having a Jack and Coke. That's really all you need to know. Yeah. So we talked about on this podcast that in the month of March, that was going to really make or break this season for the Hawks, right? They played like ass.
They did.
Quite frankly. And they're still in the playoff hunt. And leading up to today, they had a couple games against Detroit and 3 straight against Nashville.
And that was the team you're chasing.
And that's the team you're chasing. And you got Dallas right on your ass. So I figure, okay, I've been hearing a lot of stuff on Twitter about the players saying we got to treat every game like it's a playoff game from here on out.
Mm-hmm.
About them saying that they got to dig deep and find a way to beat this team that they haven't beaten this year yet.
True.
All this stuff that you want to hear. And I sit down and I start to watch the game. And it took 6 minutes for the Nashville Predators to score. 6 minutes.
That's not terrible. I've seen a lot worse, but
From this team, yeah, I guess that's something to work off of, right? And I figured, okay, you know what? There's a lot of game left. They still got time. They'll bring this back. And sure enough, DeBrincat scores. It's all tied up. I'm like, okay, we got a game. This is going to be a good one. And not too long after that, Nashville scores again. In fact, they scored 2 in about a minute and a half. And one of them was a breakaway by Matthias Ekholm. For those that don't know, Matthias Ekholm is a defenseman and should not
Allegedly.
have breakaways. And he's not fast. So I don't know how he got on a breakaway, but I think what helped him get the breakaway was Duncan Keith's turnover at the offensive blue line. I don't know if you got the chance to see that.
no, I didn't see the
But,
game. I was having my own garbage day at work, so I.
You should definitely go back and watch that pass. It was I'm gonna say it was worse than Chris Campoli's turnover against Vancouver in 2012.
I'm actually a staunch defender of Chris Campoli on that play.
For those who don't know,
lot of
Google
people shit on
Alex
him.
Burrows Vancouver Canucks goal versus Chicago Blackhawks 2012. It was worse than that turnover. Absolutely atrocious. That led to a goal. I turned the game off after that.
Nice.
And turned the game off for about 5 minutes, and I was like, you know what? This isn't that fair. It's a 2-goal game.
3-1, worst lead in hockey.
Worst lead in hockey. And I figured, you know what? I had the game off for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I turned it back on. And then when I turned it back on, none other than David Kampf scored. It's first of the season.
That
And
doesn't surprise me.
Another thing that eluded me was that this is Adam Gaudette's first game as a Blackhawk.
It is.
And he actually figured into that David Kampf goal, which is great to see. We're going to talk about him a little bit later because he was playing on the 4th line, which was a little odd. But we'll talk about that. So now, for those of you keeping track at home, the score is 3-2 Nashville. The Hawks are right back in the game, and that's where we end the second period. And I'm feeling pretty good. I think, okay, we got a game.
And I checked the score at work at this point, and it was 3-2. I'm like, oh, okay, you're right here.
They're right in it.
Yeah.
They're right in it, right? It took 23 seconds for the Predators to score in the third period. To make it worse, it was by a guy that I've never even heard of before.
Is it that guy's name? It starts with a J.
Janat.
He was the guy I was
Something
telling.
like that.
Okay, side tangent. He was the guy I was telling you about the other day who started the year in the ECHL, scored the breaks off of everybody, moved up to the AHL, scored the breaks off of everybody, and then moved up to the NHL. He scored a goal in each of the 3 major North American leagues this year. So kind of a cool development story there. But yeah, maybe don't let him score.
I was pissed. He scores 23 seconds into the third period in a game where the Blackhawks are down a goal. I don't understand how you let that happen to begin with. But it gets better because 18 seconds later, Granlund absolutely destroys Kelvin DeHaan, outworks him, just not even close on the effort, and then feeds a pass to Cunnin, who's all alone in front of the net. And that came off of a turnover as well. The Hogs basically lost that game in the span of a minute and 30, minute 45 seconds. It's where Nashville scored 4 goals. And to kind of go along with all of that, I've got some stats that kind of describe how the Hawks have been over the last month or so. Over the last 20 games, the Hawks are 8-12, which is good for 25th in the NHL. They're averaging 2.4 goals per game, which is also good for 25th in the NHL. They're giving up 3.25 goals against per game, which you guessed it, it's good for 25th in the NHL. Their penalty kill is 72.9%, which is good for 30th in the NHL. That record again was 8-12. In other words, they've taken 16 out of a possible 40 points after starting the season 13-7-5. And I think why this is so frustrating is because this brings me back to 2017 first round versus Nashville vibes. Let me explain this a little bit. So the Hawks win the Cup in 2015. Everything is great. 2016, they've got a stacked ass roster. They get upset by the Blues in 7 games. It's gut wrenching, right? We still had a good team next year. Taves, Kane, Keith, Panarin. And you got swept versus Nashville. And that was a series that, frankly, the Hawks were never in. And ever since 2017, obviously we know what happened after that. The team became dismantled, and they went into the rebuild that they're in now. But ever since 2017, Nashville has been one of those teams that the Hawks cannot beat. And it reminds me of how the Hawks played teams like St. Louis, Minnesota, and Anaheim over the last decade, where they could be losing against these teams, but you knew that they were going to come back and tie it, and they were going to come back and win it. They could just play however they wanted. It was like a lion playing with its food, you know? And that's how Nashville has been to this team for the last 4 years. The Hawks come close on the scoreboard, but as far as like the actual play goes, they're never really in it. They've been grossly outshot for the last few weeks in almost every game. They made Detroit look like a contender. I mean, this team isn't close, and they're not making the playoffs. So there's been a lot of positives this season to draw from. You know, we've talked about it to great lengths, but I think that this was just frustrating because I think that we know that this group is capable. This group is capable of scoring goals and playing defense and getting good goaltending and really making the playoffs. And it's just it's not going to happen, and it's nobody's fault but their own. So that's how I'm feeling.